Recording is on.
And here we are again with another super crazy JavaScript lesson with Stackademic. To be honest, before we start, guys, I gotta tell you that I haven't seen you in a while, like in 10 days, because I decided to take this little pause, which was meant for me to prepare some more material and for you to kind of practice on what we did. And I really missed you because it's just, I'm kind of getting used, to see you twice or three times a week to study. So, like, really, thank you for giving this to me because I'm very grateful for that. It's kind of like I have built. Me and Sunil, we have built a community of people around us, and we help each other. That's very good. That's something very positive that I like to have in my head and in my life. So thank you so much. What are we going to learn today? Well, you see, last week, or I should say 10 days ago, we practiced on the coding game website. And me and Sunil challenged each other. Arturan was participating, other people were participating. Afitz also was participating. And we had a lot of fun, but I felt that, I knew that at that point we were going to encounter maybe some methods for arrays that you haven't seen yet, or some kind of syntax in JavaScript that you haven't seen yet. So that's the focus of this lesson. For me, to show you some modern JavaScript techniques, syntax, and methods that I use literally every day and that you also need to know. So we won't learn any major concept, but this is super important, and this is part of the basically ES6 release. So in case you're wondering what happens, what is it, this Ecmascript ES6? Well, you gotta understand that every year a new release of JavaScript is created. And so in 2021, that ES12, and a lot of people are still talking about ES6 because that was an incredible release for JavaScript because it created so many things. And we're going to see some of them today, and other that are not part of ES6, but other releases. So I'm going to show you my screen. And please, as always, tell me. Okay, chat, can you see both me and my screen? Of course, you see this infinite thing, but we understood that that's understandable. Okay, so let me also zoom here. Let me start my live server instance. So as always, okay, so first here, I've signed up on some things that I want to show you. I have my environment, I have Prettier, I have ESLint, and so everything is set up for me to work this lesson. It's, as always, live server, ESLint, Prettier, that same incredible setup that we will learn to use to create our code, okay? So I have my thing here, my window here, and don't bother in watching this. Okay, so ES6, well, let's start to understand some of the modern JavaScript techniques that we can use. So since we were talking about ES6, ES6 introduces many things, and some of them include arrow functions and template literals, default parameters, let and const. Okay, let's start by, I wanted to give you a quick, just to make sure that you remember these things. So ES6, so JavaScript that was released in, I guess it was 2015 or 2016, where introduces many features. For example, let name equal Piero, let surname equal Ellie. I guess the linter isn't working because it's not telling me anything about this not being const, but anyway. So it introduced let const test equal, this is a test. And okay, so if you remember, what are the big advantages or the main characteristics of using let and const variables? Well, first of all, they introduce scopes. They are block scoped, so not only function scopes and global scope like var. So a variable defined here is scoped equal true. So this won't be accessible from here. Let's confirm that. See, scope is not defined, and so mainly they introduced this difference that they are block scoped, and so that was a big thing in JavaScript, at the time. And as mentioned, always use const and let for your variables, never bar. Bar is outdated. Another thing that, I'm going quick on these things because there are things that you already saw, and I'm going to show you some new concept. Then also arrow functions were introduced with Ecmascript Es6. So can you remember, you can have function logger, yeah, it takes in a name, and then you say console.log name, and this is a normal function declaration, but we can convert it to a function expression by going to a function, an arrow function, sorry, const logger equal, it only takes an argument, so we can say name without the need of the parentheses, fat arrow sign, and then you can go console.log name, but since it only has one instruction in its body, we can also remove that curly braces. So this is the same as this. If you see that the parentheses popped up again, is because it's my previous configuration, which forbids me from having, from not using them when creating an arrow function, which is something I agree with, because an arrow function so short is very, skimmable with your eye. So if you have a very large file, you might confuse that for a variable, and you may not be able to find the function you're looking for. So there is this kind of big fuss around arrow functions, but honestly, I prefer normal function declarations like this. They're more appropriate. This keyword is, is clear, and so I just prefer that. Okay, so these were things that we already saw. Chat, just give me the confirmation. Do you remember about these things? Yes. Yes, that's great. So that was some basic JavaScript, but still, with its characteristic that we have to remember about. So you may also remember that we have studied let and const variable and function hoisting, and I challenge you to remember that, or to go check it out if you haven't seen that lesson, or if you don't remember it. So arrow functions, we have seen that. So template literals. What are template literals? Template literals are simply a better way to write strings that are combined with some variables data. So for example, can you remember that in the beginning of our course, we always used to do something like this, const name equal Piero, and now we go like console.log, my name is, and then name. Or you can also do this, something like that. Oh, sorry, this has to be first name. Name is not a valid variable name in JavaScript. So I do this, and I just print it. My name is Piero. Super amazing. Well, turns out there is a better way to combine a variable and a string to print that data out, and that is by using a template literal. And a template literal simply is a string, basically, but you use a different syntax. So instead of using double quotes or single quotes, you use backticks. Oh, sorry. I still have to learn how to do backticks on my Mac. Okay, so on my Mac, I do that with option \. This is the symbol. On Linux, I do it using Alt, and then I have another button, but really it's meaningless for me to tell you that because I have the Italian layout. So just this is the symbol for a backtick. And so I can do is, so this is still a string, remember that? It's just a more efficient string because now I can say my name is, and instead of adding a comma and then Piero or using a plus sign with type correction, I can say $, open parentheses, first name. Let me check out the result. My name is Piero. So what is happening here? Simply, we're using a string, but when you enter this syntax with $, and as curly braces, you can enter an expression between them. So kind of you free up space for you to enter dynamic data inside of your strings. And we could also do things like add my age is, and we could add age here, 22, that's my age. My age is 22. So great. Do you see how this is a lot more efficient? And also in this expression, in these braces, remember that you can enter anything that is an expression. So I could also directly enter 22, you know? And this can be useful because sometimes you want to do some calculations here instead of defining your variable. So for example, if I wanted to say like year of birth equal 1999 const current year, which is 2021, I could say current year minus year of birth, and I can see that getting printed, correctly. And plus, with this type of template literals, you can put them, on more than one line effectively without breaking your JavaScript and, getting this kind of cool results when printing them. So this is something to keep in mind. And I really like to use this feature. It's very good. And for me, there is no reason why you wouldn't want to use it instead of, using a simple string. It's just easier. And this kind of syntax kind of, as I mentioned, frees up some space. It's kind of like a placeholder syntax where you put in things so you can clearly see the shape of the string that you're going to create. And I really like it. Was that clear for you, chat? Thanks. Okay, so again, one more feature. Let me tell you something like function. Okay, so let's create a function called calcAge. And let's suppose that this function takes the current year and then year of birth. Okay, so this is quite similar to what I did earlier. And it returns your age by doing what? Returning the current year minus the year of birth. Okay, so let's say I want to do console.log calcAge. This calcAge takes the current year, 2021, year of birth. My year of birth is 1999. Let's see the result. That's 22. So that's my age. Right, great. But let's just say that I want to, I just behave weirdly, okay? And I just don't pass in the first parameter, or I give it null. I'm going to get a wrong result. So, there is a possibility that when working in your code, you might not get a parameter in your function, maybe because that is null, or simply because it's not passed. So for example, suppose that I just pass in my the current year, which is 2021, and I don't pass the second value, which is the year of birth. You can see that that's quite problematic because now you are subtracting undefined to 2021, and that leads to not a number as a result. So when working with functions or entities in general in your program, like errors are a really big part of it. You have to perform validation when you write your functions, your generally functions, yes, or when you're writing your, React components, as you will see in the future with Sunil. So you got to think about these things, like what happens if I don't get a parameter, or what happens if the parameter is null or undefined. And one way, in this case, in which we can cope with this error, with this function, is to use default values. So default values simply means I'm using this value unless I get the one specified from the user of this function. So I want to say that, okay, what if the user doesn't pass me current year? I can say that, okay, maybe current year is we can pretend that it's, it is 2021, but we can say it's 2021 if you don't pass it, and year of birth can be, I don't know, 1980, just to avoid the function returning none. So if that is clear to you, how do you define a default parameter for a function? Well, earlier on, before Ecmascript 6, there was this mechanism where you would adopt logical operations. So I have shown you that you have logical operands like and or, but I'm not going to go into them because I don't want to overload you with informations. Just to know that to create a default parameters in JavaScript, what you do is simply using an equal sign and a expression here. So in this case, we said, okay, I'm going to return you current year minus year of birth. If you don't pass me current year, so if this value is undefined or null, because remember that not passing a value, a parameter to a function means basically passing in null. So you can see here, I'm not passing year of birth. So this calling calc age like this with only one parameter is the equivalent of saying null or undefined mainly. So if this parameters, in this case, let's start with current year, is undefined. So if it actually is undefined or not being passed in, I can say I want to assign it 2021. And if year of birth is not defined, so if it's undefined or not passed, I want to say 1980. So what do you think is going to happen when now I call calc age with this without any parameters? Let me see the result. The result is 41. Why is that? Because I'm calling this function. This function is not receiving the parameters it was expecting. So we have, coped with this kind of error by using default parameters, which is simply an equal sign followed by an expression. So why it's 41? Because it's 2021 minus 1980, which is 41. If we pass in 2021 and 1999, which is my age, 22 is the result. Why? Because there is no reason for default parameters to work and to, act if you have the parameter that the function has the parameter that he asked for. So it says, hey, did I receive a value for current year? Yes. Did I receive it for year of birth? Sure. No need to use default parameters. If I don't pass the second value, for example, the function will return 41 again. Why? Because it receives 2021 for current year. So it says, hey, did I get the value for current year? Yes. Did I get it for year of birth? No. Cool. Let's use default parameters. Was that clear, chat? Great. So we have seen another super cool thing. So spread operator now. Okay, the spread operator is kind of a fun syntax that you may have already seen in JavaScript. It's literally dot, dot, dot. Oh, sorry. It's dot, dot, dot. I don't know why Visual Studio gave me that. So, okay, what is spread operator syntax used for? The word spread basically holds the whole meaning of this operator. It spreads an array, an iterable, in place. So for example, let's say that I have console.log my array of 1, 2, 3, okay? I print that. You can see that in the console I have the curly braces, the square brackets. So, I'm sure that I'm actually printing an array. If I prefix this array with 3 dots, so this is an operator, and it's called spread operator, I get 1, 2, 3, but without the array square brackets. Why? Because I spread the array. So spreading means, like you spread Nutella or chocolate on your bread, like you spread butter. So basically spreading in this case means, extracting all the values from our array and putting them in place. What do I mean when I say putting them in place? Well, simply using them for our console log. So that's, you might ask yourself, why is this useful? Well, let's consider this example. Const fruits, let's say exotic fruits. And I don't know what exotic fruits are. Like, okay, let's use some of them. Like, I guess this is an avocado, right? By the way, yeah, you can use emojis in your JavaScript as I'm doing them. Oh, this is an avocado. I guess maybe this is a kiwi. I don't know. Then I have a kiwi, and then I have a banana. Okay, so I have this array here, and suppose that I want to do something like this. Const all fruits equal. Let's add some more fruits in it. Let's add a fun peach. And then, is this called, no, this is not cherry. It's, I don't know how it is, strawberry. Suppose that to all fruits, I want to add exotic fruits. How do I do that? I should say all fruits dot push, and then I add my kiwi. And this is very funny even to pronounce. And then I add in my avocado. So that's, pretty boring, and we can do it in a more modern way. How? Well, we can spread in place exotic fruits, and then I can print all fruits, and the result is all the fruits that I've specified. Why? Because with this operator, I'm spreading, so I'm basically removing from the array these items and putting them in place. So this is a very common use case, and usually you use the spread operator when you want to do something like this. So all fruits, and what I did here, so I got all the values that were in exotic fruits. Why did I do that? Well, because I wanted to copy the two arrays. So, I copied the values contained here by spreading them in place here. And of course, since I want to create an array, I enclose the value spread in the square brackets. A very useful case where you will see this kind of behavior is when calling functions and mainly components in React, because you will do something which is called prop spreading. And I will be there and I will help you when you will learn React, because just remember that all the concept that you are seeing now will simply be used to be put together with the React library and create beautiful interfaces. But always remember that when you will write a React component, you're writing a function. When you will do prop spreading, you're using the spread operator. So all things that you have already seen. Let me show you another useful case. The math function, the math object, which I showed you earlier in the process of our lessons, has a useful method, which is math.max. And you have to pass in basically a series of values, okay? So, and it will tell you which value is the biggest one in that series of value you passed in. So in our case is 2. Let's make this example more interesting. And I can say this 200, biggest value 200. Amazing. How can I use spread operator here? Well, suppose that I get a results from the server. I have like a server call here. And then I have student marks, which is like, the vote you get for an exam. And in Italy, they go from 1 to 10. So let's say 9, 9.5, 9.6, 9.2, 9.2, 1, 2. So people who didn't study. And we want to get the max value from the student marks. Let me pass in student marks here, not a number. Why is that? Well, simply because if I go to check, max method accept not an array of values, but actually a series of parameters, So actually we can pass in as many parameters as we want. But so how can I use my student marks here? What if I have 10,000 values in it? Because those are student marks from a very large university. I don't want to copy here every single mark, going from here to 10,000. Oh, sorry again for that. How can you do that? Simply spread them in place. Student marks. Let me check the result. 9.5 is the max one. So what I did here, I used the spread operator, and the spread operator said, okay, I'm going to spread in place. So I'm going to take and put in place all the elements from this array, which you provided me. And so it kind of did the service for us of doing 9.5. It kind of did that for us by copying them here, by spreading them here. Was that clear for you, chat? Great. Let me show you again another couple of things which I really care about, and those are related to arrays and loops. So can you remember that I showed you that if you have an array, let's use our student marks array again, and I want to print all of them, I can use a for of loop, right? I'm not going to go, on explaining again what a loop is, because at this point you should know that, and if you don't, you can feel free to contact me in private on Discord, or of course what I suggest you to do is go back to our lessons and have a recap on that concept, and mainly do that and practice. And I can say that now I want to print student marks E, and I can see that I have all my results here. Amazing. All right. So there is a better way to write loops. There's a more modern way to write loops, and that is using the for of loop. How do you do that? You say for let, so very similar to the for loop, mark of student marks, and you say console.log mark. I'm gonna remove this for now. Let's see if it prints the same result. It does. So what is happening here? Well, it's really, super easy. Okay. What is happening here? It's super easy. Simply, instead of expressing the student mark length and incrementing that, the for of basically does a lot of things for us. So we have a declaration at the beginning of it. So we're saying this basically means I am going to call every item that I'm going to iterate through mark. So, when I want to refer to the current item, instead of using students mark.e, because, I'm using this counter, I'm just using mark. So you see, we already removed this kind of weird syntax. So this means for every item inside of student marks, print it. Again, every item inside of student marks is going to be called mark. And what I want to do with that is just print it. I could also call it, I don't know, Piero. I could print Piero, The result will be the same. You're seeing double here because I didn't comment this. The result will be the same. Simply what I'm saying is I want to iterate through students mark, and every item inside of students mark will be called Piero, and I can refer to that value now, So basically this, let's go back to mark. This is replacing this. And that's very useful. That's, it just removes some burden for us, because we don't have to remember to add the increment operator here. We don't have to add 0. It's kind of this hack that was created around loops is not necessary anymore. Again, for every item inside of students mark, I want to print it. Was that clear for you? Do I suggest you use the for of loop? Sure, why not? You remove the burden of using increment operators and this syntax. So really, there is no reason, if you can, to basically use a for of loop. I suggest, and this is kind of a little homework I want to give you, to go check out how you get the index if you are in this kind of loop, if you can get it. And then we have the for in loop. Okay, so this is the for in loop enters the JavaScript world from a situation that many people may have, may not think about. Suppose I have something like this, const salaries, and I have my object, and my object has Piero, and this is salary. And then he has Mario, and he has this salary. Let me say, let me diversify them. And then I have Maria, which is the richest one. Okay, so, what happens sometimes when iterating in, sometimes you want to iterate through an object. You can do that, in case you're wondering, like, wow, can I do that instead of using an array? Yes. Why do you want to iterate through an object? Because suppose that I'm writing a program for talking about statistics, or I want to print out the salaries contained in my object. I want to be able to print, both the name of a person, of an employee, and its salary. So how do I iterate through an object in this case? Well, you can use a loop called for in. The syntax, it's equal to the for of. So let person in salary, let's do salary in salaries. And I can say console.log salaries, salary dot, let's say just salary. Piero, Mario, Maria. What is happening here? Well, I'm iterating through the keys of my object. So basically, this is equal to the for of loop, but instead of looping, in an array, you're looping through the keys of an object. So for every key in this object called salaries, and of course, again, I could call this Piero, Pinco Pallino. I want to do something, and what I want to do is print it in this case. So you can see I have Piero, Mario, Maria. Let me go back to Piero here, and you can see that it prints those. You can see I can also add another one, and you can see it prints that too. So now remember that this is a key. So we are holding the key of our object. And if we want to print both the key and its value, how can we do that? Well, simply, we can say template string. Let's use it here. So salary, so the current key has a salary of, let's change this to person to make this clearer. So person, which is the current key, has a salary of, and this is the whole object. So I can say this salaries of person. Let's print that. Oh, great. It works. So this is holding the current key, which in our case is the name of a person. So I'm saying person. So in this case, let's say on the first iteration, Piero has a salary of, and again, salaries are a full object. And remember that if you want to select salaries.piero, you can do either salaries.piero or salaries Piero. You can see the cool visual suggestions that Visual Studio Code gives us. And so that's what we're doing here, salaries person. So hope that was clear for you, chat. Hope yes. Great. You're doing great, guys. Let me go with the last concept of today's lesson. And let me show you them. So this method, so suppose that Again, let's go with our students' marks. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I want to show you 3 of the most used methods that you will use when working with an array. You can use them for coding game lessons, like challenges. You will use them with React because these are just so common. And I guess they were also introduced by Ecmascript Es6. I'm not sure, but we can check it later at the end of the lesson. So let's start with the map method. What does array map do? Well, mapping simply in the context of an array means turning an element into something else. So let's say array.map. I want to. Why it's not showing that to me? Okay, so I'm gonna copy this example. I wanted to check if this was part of Ecmascript Es6. It's not written here. Anyway, I'm removing this for a while. Okay, so mapping in the context of an array simply means to do something, to perform some transformation on each element of the array. So for example, let's suppose that we want to double each number in this array. How can we do that? Well, we could create an array2, which is an empty array, and then we could iterate, like let number of array1, and we can say array2 dot push number multiplied by 2, right? Sorry for the background noise. Array2. Let me see that. Array is not defined. Why? Oh, array2. And we have those values double. So 1 becomes 2, 4 becomes 8, and so on. But this is boring, and this kind of transform each element of an array is what the map method, array method, was created for. So simply what we can do is say const array2 and say array1 dot map, and okay, so array.map takes in a function as a parameter that is allowed in JavaScript, because remember that in JavaScript functions are first-class citizens. When you hear that word, it simply means that you can use JavaScript functions as value. And you have already seen that, right? Because you can say const my function equal function, and blah blah, you write the code in it. So it just means that you can use functions. Functions can be used as values. Okay, so it takes in a function. This function takes a parameter, which is the current array element. We're going to call it number, and we can say number plus 2. Let me see if this works. Oh no, I got the syntax wrong. Okay, let's do it with an array function. So you see, I'm happy this actually happened, because I can show you that sometimes I forget the syntax, and that's common. So let's use an arrow function to make this clearer. So it takes in an arrow function. The parameter of the arrow function is passed automatically by JavaScript, and it's the current array item. And then what you return from this function is the modification you want to do to your array method. So let's say array2. Let me show that. Yes, I did it. So this takes quite of an explanation, okay? So a few things to notice about array.map. Array.map is a method you call on an array, okay? So you do array.map, and I will show you why in the next lesson you are able to call methods on arrays, and what's behind that. And so you do array.map, and it takes in a function. I used a arrow function in this case. So you can see this is the body of my function. To make this clearer, I could also write it as this. So function here. And JavaScript, like this method automatically passes in a parameter to this function that you wrote. And this parameter is the current array item you're iterating through. So it's kind of like looping in each item. And what this function has to return is the modification that you want to do on the current item. So in this case, multiply the item by 2. So again, array.map takes in a function. In this function, you get passed in the value of the current item, and you return the thing that you want to do, the, let's say, elaboration that you want to perform on that item. In this case is x multiplied by 2. So this function will kind of work like this. On the first iteration, it gets 1. This one gets passed into our function, to our map method. So x equal 1, you can imagine it like that. And then we say 1 multiplied by 2 and return this value. Second iteration, we pass in 4 and our function, so x becomes 4, x equals 4, and we return 4 multiplied by 2. So it doesn't have to be a multiplication necessarily. It can also be like a subtraction, and you can see that it subtracted every item in our array. So I suggest that you check this out again after we end the lesson, because it's kind of an Gnostic syntax, but once you get the grasp of it, it's really easy to master, let's say. Was that clear to you, chat? Like, did you kind of understand what we did? Yes, great. Okay, so thank you. Let's go. I want to show you one last method, because I think that I don't want to show you reduce today, because I don't want to overload you, and I can give you that as a homework. Okay, so filter, basically, okay, oh, I forgot to tell you one thing about map. Why am I assigning the result of map to array2? Well, because this whole operation returns a new array. So this new array that we're returning is simply the array that we created with the map method. So now we created an array where each item is divided by 2. So that's why we're assigning it to here. If we did array.map like this, really, this would be like an empty expression, because we wouldn't be using that in any case. And so since this is returning the array, to prove you that it's returning the array, I'm going to remove that intermediary step and print the data immediately. You see? So one last thing, the filter method. What is the filter method? Well, the filter method is simply similar to the array map method in the sense of its syntax, but what it does is it creates a new array, it returns a new array with the items filtered from the starting one. So suppose that we said const promoted students, and we want these promoted students to be an array of all the students that got a mark that was like greater than 6, because in Italy, to be sufficient as a mark, it's to be bigger than 6. So let's pretend this like that. I want to filter to this array, and you don't need any complicated algorithm. You just need the filter method. So you can do student marks, the filter. So very similar, right, to map. Again, this takes in a function, and this x is the current item of the array that you're iterating through, and what you're going to return is basically a way for the filter method to understand how you want to filter the data. So kind of a criteria to base the filtering. In my case, I want to say that I want to put in this array all the items that are greater than or equal to 6. Console.log promoted students. You see, it entered all the marks that were greater than 6. So let's make this a little bit more, let's give more sense to it. Let's say we have numbers and all even. I want to print all the numbers that are even in this array. So in this array, students on mark.filter, this is the current item, so it takes in a function, and this is the criteria. So we write the criteria here for filtering, and basically you have to write an expression, and if the expression evaluates to true, it will put the current item in the array. Otherwise, it won't. So x. So this is the expression to. This is the expression to calculate if a number is even or not, right? So numbers. Like that. Okay. So you can see that we got our all the even numbers in our array. You can see there is no trace of 3 or 1. Those were removed from all even. Why? Numbers.filter. It takes in a function, and here we pass our expression. If this expression is true, the current value we're iterating through is put into this array. So on the first iteration, things will go kind of like this. So x is 10, and the filter method will say, is 10 modulo 2 equals 0? So is 10 even? And the answer in our case is yes. So put it in all even. Let's put an odd number here. So 1 is 1 modulo 2 equals 0. So is this an even number? No. So I'm going to discard it and not put it inside the all even number. And in fact, if we refresh this example, you will see that 1 is not present in our array. A thing to note, the numbers that are discarded are simply not being put in the new array. Numbers here gets untouched. So again, if I here print console.log all even, but first I print numbers, even after our discarding, you can see that numbers was untouched. Really, this is just creating a new array for map and filter, starting from another one, but not modifying it. So, I create something starting from something else. That's what we're doing here. It's very, very easy. Was that clear for you, chat? Great. So I think that was it for today's lesson. Let me stop sharing the screen because I hate this thing that gets visible. So, wow, it was actually pretty longer than I expected. It was 1 hour. So I just wanted to ask you a quick things before I tell you what other lessons I had in my mind to do with you. So I wanted to show you asynchronous JavaScript and object-oriented programming. And yes, Artran, I haven't explained about reduce because I would like to give you that to you as a homework to kind of explore that and kind of get used to it as the documentation. So, we have Sunil. Oh, he can't use the camera. That's a pity. So I wanted to ask you, since I want to focus on preparing a little bit more in detail the object-oriented programming part and the asynchronous part. Before that, I wanted to do kind of another coding game challenge, or maybe I can just go through it and show you my process for solving problems. You can see how I perform some clashes tomorrow. Is that an idea that you enjoy? If I just do some clashes, maybe I can challenge some online players and I can see if I can perform well, and I can show you my how I perform, basically, my problem solving, because I think that will be an interesting lesson for you before going next week to our two last ones: asynchronous JavaScript, object-oriented programming, and remember that the last two, the lesson about Node and the one about TypeScript, I want to do them while we're going through the React module, because those can be better fitting in that context. So, those will be delayed. So that's a great idea. Thank you, Christy. So, okay, so tomorrow, 5 a.m., I will do that lesson. Artman, yeah, we can challenge each other, or Sunil can join, but probably I will also do just 2 or 3 challenges by myself, or maybe find them on the internet to show you how I perform some problem solving, okay? So, hope you liked the idea. And is there any question that you want to ask me? Has Piero had a haircut? I did, because I always want to look fresh. And that's it. I want to be the freshest programmer of them all. I had it last week or 2 weeks ago. A while ago, I used to have a lot worse haircut, because there was like kind of like a criminal, with the very difference in length. Now I have normal gentleman haircuts. That's how I'm also growing a beard. So is there any question regarding today's lesson, guys? Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording. How I got emojis to show on Visual Studio Code? Well, you don't get to show them on Visual Studio Code. You simply have them on your machine. So on the new MacBook, you have a keyboard button for printing emojis. And so I just clicked and selected an emoji. If you want to simply try to see that one of those in Visual Studio Code, go on a website like emoji list, Command C, like copy one and paste it in Visual Studio Code. Emojis are considered like any other character, so you can use them. There is no special selector inside of Visual Studio Code or drop down. And can we see your ESLint configuration, Piero? You can, but it's the same that I showed you for the lesson we did on ESLint and Prettier. It extends the Airbnb one, so I encourage you to go check that video out and use that. But in case you want to, okay, thank you. Water. So I guess there's no other question. Does the linter have to be for, or it can be initialized? You have to, Chrissy, you have to configure it for every project. So you create your ESLint file, your Prettier, and you have to do that for every project that you create. So there is no like button to instantiate it in that sense, if that's what you're asking. It's something boring, I know, but in general, for big projects, you just do it once and you're done. So I guess there's no other question. I can't see any of them pop up, so I'm going to stop the recording. Hopefully where is the record? Oh yeah. Oh my God, my heart stopped for